Hello, Allman Brown. Welcome to Podsongs.
Hi, Jack. Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure. So why Alastair Campbell?
Well, I find Alistair very inspirational initially because of his stance on mental health. Someone who's so much in the public eye and who comes under a lot of scrutiny and a lot of attack. And he's made himself very vulnerable and been very open about his mental health. So that's one aspect of him that I find really inspirational, uh, especially when I think as an artist, you have to connect with your own vulnerability to make, interesting and hopefully work that connects with people. So that's one aspect. And I really enjoy his attitude about never giving up. Essentially, he has this new word he talks about in his podcast called perseverance, which obviously combines perseverance and resilience. And I think you need a lot of that as well in our business in the music industry. And I think that's probably something we need in life right now as well, as we're hit with this onslaught of terrible events and upheaval and global affairs. And also because I'm 40 now, so I was quite a young lad when New Labour came in. So it was like quite a defining time in my life. And I know you're similar age, and it was such a big part of our youth. So he looms quite large in that respect as well. And I'm just curious about his time being on that team, the New Labour team. So whether or not you where your politics lie, it was a very influential and quite effective team of people. And to compare that with the current crop of the current gang that we've had in charge for a while, it is quite intriguing.
Yeah. You're going to ask any controversial questions because he's
probably just jump straight in with the Iraq War.
The dossier.
No, I'm not really interested in the controversial stuff. I've sort of made up my mind that I like him. I find him inspirational, so I don't sort of trust him over the coals. But that's another thing that I find quite inspirational about him is that he comes under a lot of fire, and I think he deals with it for the most part quite well. And he's quite honest with people. Whether or not you agree or disagree with him, he's honest, and that's something else I like. And I know there's some people who sort of hate him and write him off, and I understand that, but I am trying to avoid, as I think he is, even though he's obviously quite vociferous and quite strident in his own opinions. I think he's trying to avoid just this instant judgment that we seem to have fallen into, because I think life is more complicated.
Yes.
So yeah, I've also find that quite interesting. What he's trying to do with his podcast and his writing, just to get people to be more nuanced again. I find that quite inspirational too.
Yes, his Rest is Politics podcast with Rory Stewart is essential listening. I think if anything, if you stay around long enough, you become a statesman. And probably more so in politics. You have such perspective. They've worked in the environment, and they don't just write things off, but they say, why people have taken this decision, or what could be how difficult it is when you're actually in the hot seat.
Yeah. And I think there's also a certain amount of self-awareness, because, they are members of the sort of the in crowd, the political crew, but I think they do sort of acknowledge that and are open to sort of new perspectives. But it's a fascinating podcast.
Yes.
I find, as a middle-aged man.
He was famous as a spin doctor, and I mean, you've worked very well with your promotional strategies for music. Are you going to ask him for any tips in that area?
I made you, because I find all that stuff quite painful. Because writing music and recording music is such a joy. Like it's really fun. It's like the best part of my job, and then performing it live for people is wonderful. But then when you put all of your songs into the sort of machinery of the music business, that can be somewhat disheartening sometimes, or pulverizing, depending on what's going on.
Yeah, because I noticed he hasn't. Not that Twitter is the sort of the town hall for these sort of people, isn't it, to get on there and post their opinions. But I didn't notice he's taken a step back from that. Also, maybe mental health reasons.
I think he has, but also I feel like Twitter is sort of, I mean, it's a fool's errand now, isn't it? There's a deluge of negativity, and that's like quite a nice way to call it. I don't think you can have a balanced conversation, let alone debate on Twitter. I think it's just opinion firing, and it must be quite exhausting. I find it quite exhausting anyway.
Yeah, it must have found I know podcasting is I found it to be a wonderful experience because you can have, you go in, there's no, when someone like him is interviewed on TV, it's sort of sound bites and cuts and fast, but podcast is a very relaxed format. We can just chat until the cows come home, and he must find that a very liberating format just to be able to chat with us.
Yeah, it must be cool. It also must be strange, starting up a podcast and then becoming so popular. It's a bit of a runaway train. But one of the reasons why I like the podcast, I don't know what you guys are like listening out there, but if you get a podcast that you really like and you sort of listen to it quite religiously and quite aggressively, and with me, all of a sudden I will start to find it irritating because, it's like you're seeing someone too much. You might need a break from them. But with the rest of politics, I'm always quite happy to tune in again. And also with their leading podcasts he obviously has access to such interesting people.
Yeah, he was interviewing Bill Clinton last week. Now he's speaking to you.
Now you've done it. And that's pretty wild.
Yeah.
Just as part of the appeal of that podcast. But I've noticed that about podcasts because now there's this proliferation. Like with anything now, you just have, and it's quite intriguing. It's quite intriguing. My personal relationship with podcasts, how I suddenly just get irritated. I'll take like a year off and then I'll come back. That won't happen here, Jack. I won't suddenly get angry on pod songs. But yeah.
No, but the rest is politics. Is you always got new material. You always have to tune in because you want to hear their perspective on it. It's like going down the pub, except you're hanging around with a lot more educated mates than you normal.
Yeah, I mean, that's another thing. I think they are sort of like quite fiercely clever people, potentially alienatingly clever. I get to feel like I'm right. Yeah, no, I'm not sure I'm up there. But yeah, so I just find him an interesting guy. But the main thing is just how vulnerable he's made himself about his own mental health, which I think is a rarity. I think we grew up in the era where celebrities had to be invincible, and that the culture is shifting. And my wife is a psychotherapist, so it's quite interesting feeling the changing trend and attitude towards mental health through her career. Just sort of as being adjacent to her. So that's quite intriguing too. Yeah. And he plays the bagpipes, which I like.
So many parallels. And also the podcast he's gone live. He's touring Britain with the podcast, doing live town hall events as well. So he's parallels between you.
I find that very strange, this whole live podcast thing. I don't know how you feel about it, but
I'll let you know.
Podcast for me is like, I like to listen to it when I'm walking. It's like, it's a private thing. So I find the idea of a live podcast is just a bit funny. I mean, maybe I'm being a downer here, but I would sort of be there like with my headphones. I'm not looking at them because that's the way I'm used to it.
Yes. I would like to do it with Podsongs, except, we could go to the artist's area and they play a show afterwards. So maybe writing the song. I mean, you could do it. You're a prolific songwriter. You could probably have the song.
Oh, I wish that is very kind. I think I'm quite a snail. I'm a bit of a tortoise, not a hare. Yeah. I've sat with people and they have sort of 78 ideas in 2 hours. And I'm there like grinding, trying to get out one sort of passage. But I guess I never really think about it too much, like in terms of what I've written. But I look back every now and then. I think, there's quite a few songs. It's not too bad.
Yeah, well, no, you're doing well.
Still a bit of juice in the tank.
Yeah. But that was because you're going to write a song inspired by the conversation here, and you got to take your time. You got a year to do it. So
I'm going to do Axl Rose, Guns N' Roses, Chinese Democracy. It's going to take yes. Yeah. I've heard some funny songs from Peter Caters, the producer who I worked with on the last album. Yeah, because he's won Grammys and he's worked with the National and all sorts of cool bands, and he's done loads of mixing for massive acts. Oh. He was like mixing a Bruce Springsteen vocal the other day when he called me, which is pretty cool. But he's got loads of stories about producer friends of his who sort of nearly worked with Axl Rose on Chinese Democracy, and these sort of like weird LA stories. He's like, 6 hours late, and then he's just sort of like takes him up on a road trip. They're not talking about music, and he's like 2 days later, Axl Rose finally, after like a binge and like some crazy road trip, gets around to talking about the album. Because it just sort of was a very strange lad. Or maybe just someone who made a ton of money and then never really cared about other people's schedules.
Sometimes the guests end up interviewing on Podsongs. The guests end up interviewing the musician more than, because they're so interested in your perspective. Like, how are you gonna? Because what's ordinary to you as a songwriter is magical to someone else. To us, Alistair is fascinating. How do you just go on live TV and talk about all these complicated subjects and make these run a country? It's but for him, writing a song could be just as fascinating.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah,
that's interesting. If it shows up, that's the question. No confirmation email,
Yeah. No, but it's another thing I find interesting is because when we started Pod Songs, it was all about the song is the focus, but actually the conversation becomes more and more important because we get to see somebody like, well, Alistair today, but we get to see a subject through your eyes, and you're a fan. You're coming on not as a musician, but to me, you're coming on as a fan of his work, and we get to understand, him through your eyes.
Oh, what a lucky man!
Yeah,
and they get the Allman Brown treatment.
Yeah.
Wow, let's hope so.
Yeah, but you did you also suffer with mental health issues, or you?
I think. Well, I mean,
not prying too much.
No, not at all. But I think I'm probably the thing because I'm probably talking about this with Alistair, but I was sent away to boarding school when I was 7.
Wow.
So my basic sort of approach to mental health is like, everything's okay, stop whinging. That's sort of like inculcated into my mindset. So any sort of vulnerabilities I may have, I almost don't sort of want to acknowledge them, if that makes sense, or overplay them. Because again, one of those people where you see people with really genuine, overt mental health issues, and I'm, I'd be like, well, my life's pretty good, I'm okay. So I think it's taken me quite a long time to own any sort of big mental health issues that I have, and I think it's happened recently only because I've had children. Because I have 3 children, they're 8, 5, and 2, and
are you sending them to boarding school?
Absolutely not. No. Because that's when I realized that when my daughter turned 7, which is how old I was.
Yeah.
I suddenly, I was like, oh, you're tiny, you're a baby, and I could never in a million years dream sending you away.
Wow.
So it's when you have kids, it kind of stirs up the silt in the riverbed of your psyche because they're such a sort of explosive arrival into your life, emotionally, and you have so many big feelings around them, and it sort of just for me, it just dredges everything up because your own parents, your relationship with them, all that kind of stuff. So it all suddenly hits big time. But the boarding school thing, my wife, as I say, she's a psychotherapist, and whenever I mentioned boarding school, she'd always sort of tilt her head and say, "Oh, and I was like, oh, I'm fine, I had a great time." And it was only later when I had this moment, I was like, oh, actually, maybe it wasn't so great, maybe I'm not okay. So I've been kind of exploring that recently, and that's been interesting. But just
it's still a thing, boarding school. I mean, you're still.
It is still a thing. I mean, it's. Listen, when I went, it's crazy. When I went, I went to a school called Bravery. I went to Harrow, sort of fancy old place, and it was £15,000 a year. It was an sort of crazy amount of money. It's now almost double that. It's truly prescriptive. I think they're a little bit more emotionally intelligent and savvy as to the impact, but they seem to be at the big schools anyway. They're businesses. They make a lot of money. They now have offshoots and academies in Asia and all this kind of stuff. So when I was researching, I found this very strange. Just to answer, have they changed? I remember caning was only, I think, officially banned in the late 90s in Parliament. It had just fallen out of fashion, but it had never been officially banned, if that makes sense. So they're quite timeless subcultures, because part of their appeal, I suppose, is rooted in this idea of, the strong British tradition of boarding school, and to create a gentleman. And so they're, me. So their appeal, and it's quite seductive at times. Their appeal comes from, this aesthetic of the funny hats and the gowns and the songs and the traditions, But no, I would never. I couldn't bear to send my children away. you know, it would just be awful, it'd be heartbreaking. I mean, you've got one, don't you?
Yeah.
So you can imagine just sort of
some days it's tempting to send him away.
Yeah, some days, you know, if you want to chuck him out the window, yeah. But sort of, yeah. So I've been exploring that in terms of my own mental health, and my father. I sort of had a strange relationship with my father, and he died quite recently, and I used basically my songwriting to deal with those feelings.
Oh yeah, good material,
yeah. You know, sort of in a cynical way, I might spit it, yeah. But also, I think it's my outlet. You know, it helps me to not put everything in the big feelings box and then explode like Michael Douglas in Falling Down. Great movie, Joel Schumacher movie. So again, which is part of the appeal, I think, of Alistair and how he addresses that. And he ran that, if you read his book, Living Better, which is all about his depression, which he published, I think, in 2022. He doesn't hold back, you know, it's pretty excoriating. So I'll just jump straight in with that, you know, at 10 a.m. Like, just go, tell me about psychotic breakdown. And
you want to find a balance. You don't want it to be too light when you interview, but at the same time, we don't want to
fluff me.
Yes. No. So here's another question. So are you still in touch with all your school chums, and what percentage of them send their children to boarding school?
So I'm in touch with a few. So I've got sort of 5 really good friends, and all of them have quite varying attitudes towards boarding school. I think some of them definitely are planning to send theirs. That is a process of normalization. You know, lots of people in the older generations, you know, your father or your mum would grow up and they had a terrible time, but they'll send their kids because it's a way of saying, if I can send my own child, then it wasn't so bad for me. You know, it's a normal thing. It's it's a way to normalize the trauma of the experience. But again, now it is, I mean, financially so prescriptive. So some of them, their hands will be forced. But I know, some of them definitely, you know, they'll think that's what I did. It was great. Had a lovely time. And listen, not everyone has a terrible time at boarding school. And I certainly didn't have, like, you know, on the face of it, they were wonderful schools, you know, with amazing facilities, amazing opportunities. And nothing sort of really horrific happened to me. But the separation is huge. You know, the sort of the ramification of that separate when you're 7 of suddenly you're dropped and your parents are gone. They're just, you know, adios. So and the long-term effect of that abandonment, and it really is an abandonment, is definitely pretty insidious and quite far-reaching. So it's a weird, like, it's just a weird thing. I mean, it's quite a peculiarly British thing as well.
It is, yeah.
Doesn't really happen. But the image that we sort of import culturally in boarding school is it's all great japes. It's like Harry Potter. You know, it's like everyone's having fun. But obviously, the one benefit of boarding school for Harry Potter was that he was being abused at home. But yeah, it's this idea of British boarding school. It's all sort of, you know, pillow fights and great in the Great Hall and Christmas carols. There's no teacher. You know, that's the idea that we said. But really, it's and there are moments which are really fun, but it's not usually all like that. You just sort of have this real sense of. I remember, I still feel it every so often, just this real sense of loneliness, because you aren't just left alone. That's exactly it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's So you plus, how many million streams would you need to be able to pay for your kids?
I would need. Well, Jack, let's work it out. So, what did we say the day? I told you it's 1 million streams is £3,000.
Yeah, we were talking.
So I would need a lot more.
Yes. You need this to be a #1 hit. This song. So.
Yeah. Well, yeah, absolutely.
It's
multi-platinum.
Prohibitive. This we were talking before about the modern music business, and it's. I mean, on the other hand, I couldn't do a show like this if I had to go down. If I have to print vinyl for every episode, and just I couldn't do it. So on the other hand, you know, we do. We have the musicians in Italy. Hopefully, we work together with you on producing a track. I know you used to working with big names, but
I've only got the one big name. I've got usually that's another thing. One of the nice things about being able to do music for so long is you get a little bit of community. So I've got a great friend called Ian Barter who used to play in Amy Winehouse's band when he was a youngster and he had a tiny bit of hair. He's now beautifully bald. He produced my first 2 records. He's got a little shed down in Reading, which I go to. He makes me cups of tea and we play some music. But it was really interesting. The nice thing about Peter Catus is even though he is this sort of big cheese and he's worked with, he's like I say, Mick Springsteen and Taylor Swift and, he's worked with all sorts of like amazing bands, but he's just a very, very nice man. You wouldn't think of it. I mean, I've met some producers who sort of are very fancy and who wear their success quite heavily. But Peter, he just likes to play tennis and make tunes. That's kind of it. He's like the nicest man. And you really notice that. Within any industry, if you're in it long enough, I think that you tend to hopefully find the good eggs. That makes sense, because there are a lot of sort of a lot of people in the music business who, shall we politely say, are full of shit. And aren't particularly, I wouldn't know. You would, yeah. Who aren't particularly decent individuals. So yeah, but Peter was lovely. He just comes in and stretches. He's got all the a little bit of stretching. Got
to be done. Yeah.
Got to be done. And so that was so much fun. Just making that whole album.
Huge testament to your music as well, because atmosphere is everything with your music. Finding that take, that one. How long does it take?
Do you know, I'm probably not precious enough. So when we made that album, when we made Second Son, it was after COVID, and I hadn't really worked in quite a long time, in the sense of, COVID was this huge gap outside, and I was raring to go. I was so excited, and I didn't even have the songs ready. I had 10 days, which is just a tiny amount of time. Yeah. But I as soon as I got out of the house, because I'd just been we'd been at home for 2 years, got to America, and I was fired up. I think I wrote 6 songs there, and we recorded a song a day for 10 days, which is mad, which is, absolutely mad. And I recorded all my bits. And we did a song a day, and then I left, and there were some other sort of drums and bits and bobs added. And I, was in correspondence with Peter and sorted all that out, but it was fast. And I don't like to second guess myself too much. So if I'm recording something again and again and again and again, it's just, for me, probably not working. It's probably not good. I suggest if it's not working for some reason, and I know some people, they'll spend hours in the studio and they'll just be fine tuning everything. And I find that can be, for me, in my process, it can be, I'm going backwards, but that was a real rush. And I'm not sure I'd ever manage to do an album in 10 days again, but I just felt I was just like a horse bolting. I was so excited just to be working and just to be thinking in that way again after being, doing the COVID lockdown dad, which was, listen, it's lovely. Right? I got to be with my 3 children, and we were so lucky. We had a garden and we got a nice community here, and a lot of people had a lot worse, but just your brain needs that variety, doesn't it? It's a great phrase. David Mitchell, the wonderful writer, not the Peep Show actor, who's also wonderful. And David Mitchell, who wrote Cloud Atlas and The Bone Clocks and Black Swan Green, the writer, he talks about the mental compost heap, which is basically, when you're walking around, when you're going on a train, going for a walk, you're having coffee with your friends, or just reading, you're picking up stuff all the time, and it just all goes on the mental compost heap, and you never know when you might need that. And it's like this idea of casual inspiration. Which artists, I suppose, then will squirrel away, and they'll keep it on this compost heap. And when COVID happened, we were just doing the same thing, weren't we? We were getting up, doing the Joe Wicks workout. We'd go for our one little walk. There was one coffee place that was open. Have our coffee. We come back, make lunch. And you sort of like a hamster in a sort of an experiment. And I never realized how much it was stressing me out until maybe a year later, because I was still, I think, I was just being really crabby, and I was a bit angry, and I just hadn't processed this whole weird 2 years, when I think everyone just keeping their heads down, trying to like just get through it. So when I recorded the album, it was just awesome.
Hello, Alistair.
How are you?
Hi, Alistair.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Good. So, tell me, what is
Yeah,
this
well-
madness?
Well, Jack, you explain. You've got another jacket, so you explain.
Well, we need Alistair to be, I know it's early on a Monday morning, but super inspiring to create a hit song, Allman Brown track.
Wow. So what, we talk and you compose?
That's it. We have a chat. I go away and I spin it into gold. That's how it's supposed to work. Fingers crossed.
Amazing.
Hope so.
Good. Well, I love a bit of music, so here we go.
We're going to chat about that. Don't worry. So, Jack, do you linger over our shoulders, or do you go away?
I'll just hang around in the background. Yes.
Just hang around the background. Okay. All right. Well, I'll see you soon. Okay. So, Alistair, thanks. Brilliant. Thanks for joining us. And how are you this morning?
I'm okay. I've got a bit of a chest thing going on.
Everyone's ill.
Yeah. So apart from that, I'm fine. I didn't go swimming this morning, which is pretty bad for me.
That is bad. Well, I've just been reading your book. I've been reading Living Better. So
okay.
I'm in that weird situation where I feel like I know you very well, but obviously
There you go.
if you would talk.
We just met.
Yeah, indeed. Well, like I say, thanks for joining me. Let me tell you a little story about the first time that I was aware of you, which I think you might like. So much like your fellow podcaster, Rory Stewart, I was born in Hong Kong, and then I was sent off to boarding school when I was 7.
Child abuse.
So I agree, actually. We could talk about that. But I remember when you guys won, when New Label won, we were in the dining room at school. There's 200 boys, and my headmaster, who was like the picture postcard prep school headmaster, quite florid faced, quite rotund. He was called Mr. Fowler Watt, Donald Fowler Watt. He's a lovely man. And he addressed us just before breakfast, and he was completely crestfallen. He said, "Boys, as some of you may know, the Conservatives lost a general election yesterday." And he was devastated. I was quite bemused because I didn't really have much of a political connection to the world. And then he said grace, and he sort of went back to the top table, completely despondent. And that was the first time that you entered my orbit.
Very good. Well, you said he was a lovely man. How can you be a lovely man if you couldn't recognise that was the best thing that happened to the country?
Well, he was upset. He was good. He was a good headmaster. I always remember distinctly when there was a rule we couldn't walk on the grass on the upper terrace, and he would always just walk across the grass. That was his thing, just flouting the rules. Mr. Fowler, he was a sweet man. But yeah, so that was the first time I was aware, because obviously when you get sent to boarding school, you're suddenly put into this tiny subculture where the rest of the world feels very, very far away.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah, it is strange. And I do agree. I was just talking with Jack about this, actually, boarding school syndrome. I don't know if you've heard of that. Well, there's been a lot more conversation about it recently. I think mainly because many celebrities started to talk about their time, like Charles Spencer and Adrian Edmondson, about how peculiar boarding school can be. But it's one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you, and why I find you inspiring is reading your book. You make yourself incredibly vulnerable, which is something I think that a lot of people have difficulty to do. And I was wondering, I know you wrote it about 2 years ago, didn't you? Well, published a few years ago.
Yeah.
And I was really curious, did you feel like you could only write that book at that stage of your life? Did you feel that you had to be, because you're very revealing about your family, about your brother, and about your friends and your marriage, and just your own struggle with depression? Did you feel like you could have written that book earlier, or you reached a stage in your life where you were able to be vulnerable enough to write it then?
Good question. I've written 21 books now, and I'm never quite. The diaries, it's obvious where it comes from. But the other ones, I don't quite know where they come from and why the timing happens as it does. I don't think I could have written that book until I'd met the guy that I write about a lot, David Sturgeon.
Yeah.
Because until I got to see him regularly, I didn't really. I think I've convinced myself I thought about it all quite deeply, but I'm not sure I did. I think I dealt with it. Whereas I think what he sort of taught me to do was genuinely to think about it all. And I think I've always been, I'll tell you what, I've always been somebody who, Marilyn Monroe, Thinking Ink, I've always written a lot. And I think eventually anything that percolates in me for a long time, eventually it comes out in written form. Might be a book, might just be a piece of writing. And that can go for things that are quite short term as well.
Yeah.
So I'll give you a classic example. I've just written my new European column yesterday. And I say in it, I'm kind of tying with the idea of writing a book about how progressives should take on populism better than they are at the moment, right? Now, I may or may not write that book, but the fact that I've voiced the thought that I might means I probably at some point will.
Probably will. Yeah, okay.
And I think with the depression book, I think it just percolated away over a long period of time. So by the time I wrote it, it felt kind of, I felt very, very comfortable writing it. And once I decided what its basic purpose was, because when the subtitle, How I've Learned to Survive Depression or Live with Depression, I think it says Survive Depression.
Yep.
The publisher's original subtitle, they wanted to write How I've Learned to Beat Depression. Well, I haven't, and I never will. So I've learned to live with it, how I've learned to survive it. So, yeah, and I think the thing about vulnerability, it's interesting. See, I don't feel it's that vulnerable. I hate it when people say to me, so brave. So brave. I don't like that at all because, bravery to me is kind of, it's soldiers, it's firefighters in California right now. It's people who are putting themselves under real physical threat.
Yeah.
Whereas I feel that what I'm doing is helping me as well as I hope helping others. That's a very, very simple thought, but when I talk about it, I feel better about it. When I analyze it, I feel better able to understand it and therefore live with it.
Okay, so I guess you feel like it's not, because sometimes bravery can be very selfless. Like that physical bravery you're talking about, you're acting for someone else. But I suppose what you're saying is the book sort of helped you, so you feel like because you had benefit.
Yeah. And also, I say in the book that, I have this kind of life rule: if bad stuff happens, try and get something good out of it. Well, a book is a good, I like books. I like reading books. I like producing books. I like talking about books. So that says to me, this is a good thing that's come out of lots of bad stuff. And even in the bad stuff, like, for example, if I talk about some of the sessions that I had with David Sturgeon when I was really not in good shape, or my breakdown, or the depressive episodes that I've got through, I kind of feel the ability to make something of them is important. So, for example, you've read that book, but the other book that I always think goes alongside it is my first novel is basically about mental illness. Yeah. And you know what? I wrote that book. So it's by the main character is called Martin Sturrock. Right. So my psychiatrist has the same first four letters of his surname. Now, that was not deliberate.
Yeah. Just percolated it.
It just sort of evolved. And I dedicated the book to him and to another psychiatrist that I had back in the 1980s. And so these things just kind of, they percolate and then I think they come out in written form.
Fascinating. It was a wonderful, wonderful book. I wanted to ask you about vulnerability in terms of politics and about being able to do an effective job, because I feel like I was really fascinated when John Prescott passed away recently, and I'm sorry, I know he was your friend. Yeah. I was really struck by some of the clips of him and William Hague debating in the chamber.
Yeah.
And I was, again, just thinking, and maybe, it's sort of looking back on the past with sort of rose-tinted glasses and listening to some of the interviews with former colleagues on leading, like David Blunkett. And there just seemed to, and also with Ben Wallace recently, there just seemed to be more affection between the opponents, the political opponents, and they were able to use their friendship and their relationship in a more constructive way to run the country. And we've obviously lived through, the Tory. I mean, it's a shit show, but Truss and Johnson and Sunak, who seem to have this ability where everything was always okay, everything's great. In no way could they be personally vulnerable. And I just feel like it seems like quite a dangerous state of affairs when you have these people who are so seemingly lacking in self-reflection, which was another reason why I found your book inspiring, because as a public figure, and one of the reasons that I found it brave, I know you don't consider it as brave in that sense, but you are very open to be attacked. There's lots of people who will throw stones at you or try and tear you down for various reasons. And I feel like we have leaders now who don't have an interest in that vulnerability. And I feel like it's sort of calcifies into being an ability to not being able to empathize, which seems to...
Yeah, I get, I mean, that being said, you see snapshots of it. So, for example, Keir Starmer's brother just died over Christmas.
I didn't know. Yeah.
And in the Commons, both Kemi Badenoch and Ed Davey and the SNP guy, they started the first Prime Minister's questions after him. They started with, words that they could have looked formulaic, but they didn't feel formulaic.
Yeah.
And so I think there's something within our party. So, for example, I saw some of the clips you're talking about where William Hague was up against John Prescott, and it was brilliant. It was brilliant.
Yeah. We did
they were
great,
really funny and battering lumps out of each other. I bet you I could go and find clips of John Prescott being really, really nasty about him.
Yeah.
So I think what happens is when people die, we make a kind of different sense of them. But I wouldn't underestimate how much, having had Donald Trump as the major figure in world politics for the 4 years he was president and now happening again, how that really does kind of drive out that sense of the importance of empathy. We did. I don't know if you listened to the interview we did with George Mitchell, the American senator, and he talked about when he was leader of the Senate, of the Democrats in the Senate, and the first thing he did was to contact Bob Dole, who was his opposite number, and say, I will never criticize you personally. I will never attack you personally. I think you and I should have lunch or dinner every week and talk over what we think. Now, it's impossible to imagine that with Trump.
It really
that has an impact on other forms of politics. And yet, you do see, I'll give you an example. The thing about the mental health stuff is really interesting, because you're right that there aren't many people in politics who put themselves out there in the way that I have. But I know a lot of people in politics, both Tory and Labour and other parties, who've got in touch with me about some of their struggles, because they think because I put myself out there, I will talk to them more openly, which I do, and I'm perfectly happy about it. And other people, it's a very, very personal thing. There's another MP I know who I was approached by. He's a Tory. I was approached by a friend of his and said, he's really struggling, and I don't know. I think he might appreciate it if you just sort of reached out to him. So I did, and the guy just didn't want to know.
Okay.
And I think it's a very personal choice. Some people, they'll come to you. And so, but I think the thing I've discovered is that I think once you have made yourself vulnerable, or you put yourself out there, or there's kind of nothing that goes on in your head that you're not willing to be open about, it's these attacks that people make, they don't really hurt.
Yeah.
If they came from my family, both my parents are dead, but if either of my parents had ever said them, I'd be really upset. My kids, if my kids, sometimes we all have arguments with our kids at times, and if one of your kids says something that hurts, it really hurts, right? But somebody on social media or the Daily Mail, or it doesn't get anywhere near me. And I think that's because what people see as vulnerability has actually given me a strength. It's given me a real strength. And the other thing I'd say is that I get attacked over all sorts of things every single day. If you just look at anything I put on social media, There's one guy, he responds, every single thing I do on social media, he responds by saying, you should be in jail. Every single day.
Yeah.
And then there's another guy who puts up a picture of David Kelly to every single thing I post, okay? You get used to it. But so that's just a kind of fact of life, and you live with the fact that you're being attacked. But generally, on the mental health stuff, it's very rare that I get attacked over. Just occasionally you might get somebody have a pop, or but very, 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 very rare. And I think that's because actually, it's not that people see it as brave, although some people do.
Yeah.
I think it's more that people think, well, at least he's kind of out. He's sort of authentic. He's honest. He's talking about what he really thinks and really feels. And there's part of it. I think a lot of it came from, as you say, I write a lot about my brother in the book. And a lot of it came from growing up. Not growing up. I was 18 by the time he was ill, but developing as an adult with that as a very, very big part of my life. And it made me think, well, I'm not going to be ashamed of him at all. He just happens to have an illness, right?
Yeah.
But then when I started to realize I had mental health problems, I wasn't going to be ashamed of that either.
Yeah.
Well, sorry.
So I just find that it's fascinating because this idea of shame is obviously, I think it's quite a big deal because my dad is from the Potteries and my mum is she was born in Singapore and I was born in Hong Kong, but she struggled with her mental health her whole life and still does. And it's never been addressed, because she comes from a background where you just don't talk about it. She's been, I would suggest, self-medicating her whole life. And she's trapped. I love her dearly. And now being a bit older, and I've got children of my own, three kids like you, they're smaller, they're 8, 5 and 2. I'm a little bit more, I'm more understanding and I'm kinder because I'm less angry. I went through that stage where I was angry with her. And now I'm just kind of amazed that she's managed to even live the life that she has, because she has this huge burden, which she hasn't been able to put down, I would suggest. Yeah. And my brother also, who I love very much, he's a soldier. He served in Iraq and Afghanistan. And he also, he went to boarding school like me when we were young, but he is very much all the feelings go in the feelings box. And he's only recently, I think, started to sort of address that. He's not totally self-aware. I remember when he came back from Iraq for the first time and he had quite a nasty tour. And I was quite a young guy, a bit like you when your brother was diagnosed. I was 18, sort of 19. I said, should we go out? Should we have fun? And he said, Fat Boy. He calls me Fat Boy. Sorry, that's his nickname for me. He says, I don't know. If I go out, I'll either end up crying in the corner or I'll beat the crap out of someone. So he's not totally self-aware, but he now deals with it all through physical activity. He swam the channel the other day.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. It took him 14 hours. So amazing.
Because that's because the tides take you in directions you don't go, isn't it?
He didn't beat the tides, so he made it eventually. And then he swallowed, a long time. And then he had a paracetamol afterwards, and he got stuck in he didn't swallow it properly. Got stuck in his nose, and he laughed at this. The cure for that was he had to dissolve it with salt water. So he just had to gargle salt water off the channel. Right. So I find it intriguing. So what I got from your book and what you've said there about how you don't feel these attacks, that they slide off you, because it seems like you have such a strong community around you, friends and family, which you draw sustenance from and strength. And you mentioned Trump earlier in creating, and people like Farage and Tyson, Musk, all these people who are sort of desperate to create division. Even now Trump is talking about the fires, and the first thing he says, he's like, they don't know how to put him out. He's the living embodiment of division and acrimony. And I think this community now seems to me so important the older I get, in terms of being able to do a job well. So I was thinking about New Labour and when you guys came in, and you just seemed to be a real team. It seemed to be a collective with a driving vision.
There were tensions, there were divisions, there were difficulties. But I'd say it was a team, definitely. We had, certainly around the kind of non-politicians around Tony, we were a real team. I mean, when Tony stepped down in 2007, he had a dinner at Chequers for all the people who'd kind of been there the whole way through.
Oh yeah.
You know, people who'd been with him in the 97 campaign and even before that. And, you know, some of them you would know, Peter Mandelson, me, Jonathan Powell, Pat McFadden, David Miliband.
Yeah.
You know, there were a lot of people who went on to become very, very well known. Lots of other people there you'd never heard of. But we're still all very, very tight. Doesn't mean we don't have, you know, we've had big ups and downs. But I'd say, and that's incredibly important I think in any big, tough challenge is really, really important that you can build that sense of a team and kind of mutual respect and mutual loyalty and also complementarity. You know, we don't, I think a lot of the times in politics, particularly when the closer you get to the top. So if you think about Trump at the moment and look at his first term, the closer the people get to the top, the more they seem to fall out.
Yeah.
With us, and I'm not talking about the politicians here, because the truth is, you know, Tony Gordon, difficult, John Prescott, peacemaker, but sometimes the opposite. You know, it was, but for most of the key people around him, we were very, very, very locked.
Yeah. And you just, I don't know, I feel like you don't really see that much currently, but that might just be.
I think you probably wouldn't have thought that you were seeing it then. But yeah, I mean, I think that classic example, you know, the Sue Gray, Morgan McSweeney thing under Keir Starmer, I don't think that would have happened with us. But it doesn't mean that we didn't have, you know, Peter Mandelson resigned twice. You know, we had to move people on sometimes from the inner team. But that wasn't usually, I'd say that the core people who were with Tony the whole way through were, you know, classic example. I can't ever remember having a crossword with Jonathan Powell. He was chief of staff. I was head of comms. He didn't mind the fact that loads of people in the media said I was the main guy. He didn't bother him one bit. I didn't want to do his job. He didn't want to do my job. We spoke all the time. We respected each other. We accepted that we were good at a lot of things and less good at other things. But we knew where we had to go when we were talking about the things that we were less good at.
Yeah. But that seems to be like, you know, you have a healthy relationship with your ego, you know, and your sense of self-worth that you don't.
Yeah. I mean, listen, I think most people who get into any kind of, you know, major public profile, you've got to have an ego because otherwise you know, and I think that I've always felt that I've always kind of felt my opinion matters.
Yeah.
And you know, I don't mean that in an arrogant way, but I think about things, and I'm not going to be made to think something differently just because somebody else tells me to. I'll think about it. And I think that comes from ego. That comes from a sense of self-confidence and self-worth. But listen, the truth is, when you get into a depression, that's the thing that goes. Is any sense of self-confidence and self-worth. That's when you start to think, I don't deserve anything. I shouldn't be here. Everything I do is bad. I'm not clever. I haven't done anything with my life. You know, all those thoughts become overwhelming.
Have a swamp.
Yeah.
Well, it's difficult. Well, I feel actually, just to go back to this whole concept of this podcast is that a musician is supposed to choose someone who isn't a musician that inspires. And I feel we may have Trojan horsed you in here actually, because I didn't know that you also wrote music on the pipes.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, I mean it is, and it's not.
I recently enjoyed the March of the Pots.
Yeah, which was the guy who I mentioned, Finlay MacDonald, who's there at the Live Piping Centre. You just thought he might have said that was a really nice plug. That was a really nice. And do you know what he said? You played it too fast. But you know the reason for that. The reason for that, you'll get this. So, where is my chanter? Here it is.
So, tell me, what is this? So is this part of the bagpipe, or is it just a separate thing?
No. This is what you learn on.
Right.
But it's also if you're practicing, if you're playing a tune, you know, you don't have the bag. So there's a reed.
Yeah. Oh, so it's
that's
within
just a plastic reed.
Yeah.
So in the real bagpipe, you've got a chanter which is the 9 notes, and right, you've got a blowpipe, which fills the bag, and the pipes are the 3 drones. Okay.
Yeah.
So this is just to practice on. And the thing is, the reason I played it fast is when you got the bag, you take a breath, but you squeeze the bag and the air keeps going. Whereas on this, you have to take a breath. So I played fast, so I didn't have to take a breath.
Okay. So it's physical. I mean, like playing a bagpipe sounds physically, quite demanding.
Yeah, I mean, some people just cannot get the hang of the blowing, with the squeezing and making sure. Because if it's irregular, the noise just becomes like a cow mooing, or and so no, it's not physical, but it's. I'll tell you the other thing that happens if you play a lot. When I was a busker, when I was in my 20s, if you play a lot, your lips start to crack, and it can be. It is tiring, but no. So if I'm playing a tune, if I'm thinking of writing a tune, and again, like the books, you never know where they come from.
Yeah, I was going to ask about your process.
Well, the one about Rory's pots,
pricey pots,
which I've yet to give to him because he's traveling, right? But I've got it framed for him. But the thing about that was, I just thought we were doing this tour. On the podcast, it became a thing that he kept going on about how much he loved pots, right?
Love the pot.
So when we did the tour, we got his 2 best pots without him knowing. We got them brought to one of the venues, and then I just thought I'll write a tune. Sometimes you can sit down, you can just literally say to yourself, "I'll write a tune." Okay. Other times they come to you just randomly. And what often happens, I don't know if you get this, but you write a tune, say you're driving the car and a tune comes into your head, but then you forget it.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So that's why this is helpful. You stop, and you play it, you record it on your phone, and then you've got it. And then you can go back and then I'll plug in the AirPods and I'll play along with it. And then I'll listen. I'm not pretending I'm a great piping. I write.
I don't know.
I write pretty decent, okay tunes. I've written one tune that I'm really proud of, which is a lament I wrote a few years ago now. But there's it's just and that's what I love when I'm watching telly and stuff. What did I watch the other day? I love stuff about the creative process. That the Beatles documentary, Let It Be.
Oh, it's amazing. Oh,
it's just incredible. When you're watching people that you know to be geniuses, my favourite bit in the whole thing is when Paul is with George, and they're trying to work out with what was the song? They're trying to work out whether to go high or low in one of the songs, and because the long and winding road. It's the long and winding road. Yeah. The long, and eventually they get to what we all know now they've got.
They get it. Yeah,
fabulous to watch. I love it.
Well, I find it interesting when you see documentaries about creation, because I think really, really great music, it doesn't feel like it's sort of external. It feels like it's just been in your bones the whole time, and someone's discovered it. Like an inherited memory. Like when you listen to ABBA, and I can't remember when I first listened to ABBA, but I can always remember knowing. Well, you can always remember just knowing the songs because they seemed like they were just sort of unlocked within me. And the Beatles are a bit like that.
No, I can remember ABBA. It was when they were on telly in Brighton.
Oh yeah, they're a great band. Have you been to the show?
I've been several times. Britain in the jury they got 0 points from the UK.
Cool.
Can you believe that?
Well, I had a friend who's a guitarist who played at the Eurovision at Azerbaijan when we got 0 points quite recently. Okay. I think it was the Engelbert Humperdinck. Actually, I think he got a couple of points, but not the poor lad who got 0. That's pretty hard. I can't believe you stole Rory's pots. Must have been livid.
Didn't steal them. He got them back.
But no, I do recall. But have you seen Love and Mercy, the film about Brian Wilson?
No.
It's with John Cusack and Paul Dano, and I don't know if Brian Wilson had a very strange relationship in later life with a therapist who essentially tried to control him and who moved into his house and was trying to take over his finances and his music. It was a weird story, and it's with John Cusack and Paul Giamatti, the guy from Seinfeld.
Is it a feature?
It's a feature film, and then there's one strand, and then he fell in love with the lady. I think she was a car salesman, and secondhand car salesman. And then she recently died, but they had a long and happy marriage after that. And then in the past, there's the recording of Pet Sounds, which is one of the best, I think, in any sort of film, any sort of feature film of the actual recording process. When you see him in the studio fooling around, trying to get this weird album, this strange, peculiar sound. And it's a really good film. It's called Love and Mercy.
Definitely see that. The other thing, my favorite musician ever is Jack Brel, the Belgian singer, and so Radio 4 asked me to do a documentary about my thing about Jack Brel, which all started with somebody actually wrote a play about this, which was on in Nottingham Playhouse. So basically what happened was I was busking in the south of France. I was hitchhiking from Aix-en-Provence back to Nice, which is where I was based. And I got a lift with this Belgian lorry driver, and we're driving along, and he's listening to this Belgian radio station. And all of a sudden, we interrupt the program with the news flash. Jacques Brel est mort. Okay? Yeah. Jack Brel's died. And this lorry driver, he's a classic sort of fat, vested, suntan, one arm, all that stuff, chain smoking, tattoos. And he was just absolutely shocked. Now, I didn't know anything about Jack Brel, but for the rest of the journey, they played back-to-back Jack Brel songs. And when it came to Ne me quitte pas, which is probably his most famous song, I looked across and this Belgian lorry driver was just tears flooding down his face, right? Anyway, so I then started to get into Jack Brel. And so I told this story, and BBC got in touch and said, would I do a documentary about Jack Brel, who's dead. But we found the last surviving member of his band, his main group, who was the accordionist. And so I went to Paris we found him, we tracked him down, went to Paris, sat down to talk to him. And this guy, I wish I could remember his name, and he's probably dead now because this was quite a few years ago. And he said, "Oh, okay, so you want to talk about Brel? I'll talk about Brel." But and he sat with his accordion. He said, "But you ask me a question, I'll play a tune. If you get the tune, I'll answer the question. If you don't, we move on."
Love it. Okay.
Anyway, but it worked because I got most of them. But he was saying that the creative process was, well, tell me how it worked. If you take a song like Quand on n'a que l'amour, which is again, that's the other one of his two songs that just
the big one.
Know. And he said he would come in usually after a heavy night, or maybe he'd met somebody. He was a bit of a womanizer, and he'd come in, and he'd just start with a line. He'd have a line, or he might have a verse. He might have a fragment of a melody. And he said then they'd just sit down, and he'd be on the accordion. There'd be a guy on a piano. There'd be a guy on a guitar. There might be a guy on a sax. Brel would be singing and playing guitar. And he said sometimes it would be absolutely chaotic, but then after 5-10 minutes, they'd suddenly go, that's it. And they'd get it. And then they'd just sort of feed off each other. But it was just brilliant watching this, doing this interview while he was playing the accordion the whole time. It was fantastic.
That's so cool. I find my process is, I do co-write now, and that's a lot of fun because I think one of the most loveliest things about writing music is doing it with other people when it works, when it clicks. But usually it's just me on the guitar. And I find my process is if I see a film or read a book, I find very moving, and I try and take that feeling that something's given to me, and then I try and synthesize it down. That's sort of how I try and do it.
Yeah. But do you find to start with lyrics or melody?
It's either or, but I find when I can finally write the song is when I know what the hell I'm writing about. Because I could write umpteen sort of slightly okay love songs, which will all be very, jaunty or whatever. But one of my favorite writers is Bruce Springsteen, and his big thing is, the narrative, the story. And if you listen to some of his best songs, some of the quiet songs, like, Born to Run, is about the need to escape, really. It's about the need to move and be free. So when I know what it is I'm trying to get at, then the song will flow. If I don't...
And how do you do like this stuff that we're doing now then? What's your creative process for this?
Well,
are you as we're talking, are you thinking about it?
It's still going. Well, no, I sort of had I probably came in with an idea already, because I want this song to have bagpipes. I want it to have pipes, and I know you like to write laments. So what struck me most about reading your book was just the affection and the love that you have for your family and friends.
Mm.
And in particular, your one friend, is it Philip Gould? Is that his name?
Yeah.
And this idea about leaving the world a better place. And that just struck with me, because I feel it sort of resonated with me, because I feel like that's the currency, really. You know, when you reach the end of your life, you want to look back and think, I did some good here. You know, I supplied something worth remembering, and hopefully that will endure. Like an idea, you know, just planting a tree that you might never see, that sort of idea.
Well, that's why I always think that when we talk about legacy, I mean, the truth is, very, very few people in politics have enduring historic legacy.
Well, I was thinking about Northern Ireland with you guys.
Yeah.
That was my
But also, I think if you're the other day when the guy who wrote Hymne à l'amour died.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, if you've written that one piece of music, which Edith Piaf made famous, Celine Dion sang at the Olympics, which I mean, that's your life. It's fine. If you're right, you've got Mozart, you've got Beethoven, you've got the Beatles, you've got a small number of people for whom it's massive, right? They're going to be played and remembered and talked about forever. Yeah. But then, even with that one piece of music that guy wrote, that's pretty cool. And I think the same with books. I think that, that's why I think books are so important. You leave a book, you leave it behind, and okay, most books, after most people die, they get forgotten, they get remained and what have you, but a lot don't. I thought this about, back to, the power of music. When I was at school, if you were studying history and doing American Constitution stuff and all that, right? And you talk about the big figures in American history, I'm not sure Hamilton would have been the person that you'd have learned about. Along comes a musical, and it's sort of back. He's back from outer space.
I was thinking about this idea of legacy. I was having a conversation with my friend who he's an Australian. He lives in Norway. I know you like Oslo. Have you done a sauna and a swim in Oslo on the fjord? It's absolutely amazing. So I tend to go and just do that and then stay with him. But he was talking to me and he said, I'm so jealous of you because your kids will grow up and they'll get to listen to your songs. I was like, well, what do you mean? He said, well, I work in corporate finance, and my kids are like, what do you do? And I've got nothing to leave behind. And I'd never thought about it.
Well, I'll give you, just on that. So there's a huge photograph of my brother playing the pipes on that. So if ever I do any of those kind of desert island disky type programs, with I bring on a piece of music, the first one I always bring on is Donald Campbell by Donald Campbell. It's a piece of music that somebody wrote for my dad. And it's a recording of my brother playing it. They're both called Donald Campbell. It's Donald Campbell by Donald Campbell. And I play it. They're both dead now. But every time I play the pipes, I play it. Now, the guy who wrote that is called George McIntyre. He's dead as well. That's something he left behind.
I'm curious. I'm just sorry to jump around, but I'm curious about Northern Ireland because, like you, I read Say Nothing by Patrick Radden Keefe. And there's also a brilliant book, brilliant film by Ken Loach called The Wind That Shakes the Barley, with Cillian Murphy, which is about the Civil War after the uprising. And I was really struck, again, when I was at school, the IRA to us, when we were young guys, it kind of meant, that's why there are no bins in the train station. And as I grew up, and then after, the sort of the Brexit catastrophe and when the Northern Ireland peace process was brought back into jeopardy. And I was struck by two things. One, by how little my generation knows about the conflict. I mean, really, my brother was in the Irish Guards, actually. So I knew a little bit more. And then it was only through saying nothing and learning and just being curious about the state of affairs that led me to realize my total ignorance and most of my generation's ignorance about that situation. Wow. And I recently watched, I think you've watched about Once Upon a Time in Northern Ireland, the BBC documentary. And I was so struck that something that was so seismic, such a ginormous achievement, political achievement, and human achievement, really, and all the personalities involved, and how quickly, I guess, progress and good things seem to fade from memory. My wife and children are Jews, and again, I'm a bit of a history buff, and I realized I was a middle-aged man when I started buying political biography. Yeah, I bought the JFK Volume 1, geeking out. What a fascinating guy. And I realized, just studying quite intensely about the Second World War and then the ramifications of the Second World War into the state of modern Europe, how, we're now living in I guess, another turn of the wheel. Because when I grew up and when New Labour came into power, I had this sense that, everything was going to be okay, and that we were on the up, that there were possibilities. And now I realize the thing that I've been really struggling with over the past year is now I think, I'm living in the age of decline, essentially, and I'm living in the age of the shift to the right. And my children will grow up in this world, a nastier world, maybe a scarier world. And I just was one of the reasons, again, I find you inspiring, is this idea of, perseverance, of never giving up, which you can apply also to the music industry, because you can be back to it in the music industry as well. And I was just wondering, do you still draw a lot of strength from your achievements, or are you more of you strike me as someone who looks forward a bit more, is like, what will the next thing I do?
Yeah, a bit of both. I mean, for example, the piece of music I mentioned that I was really proud of was when we had the anniversary events in Belfast last year. I think it was Friday Green, was this huge anniversary event. Bill Clinton was there, George Mitchell, Tony, Bertie Ahern. But of course, lots of the key people were dead. John Hume, David Trimble, Martin McGuinness, Mo Molam, and also lesser people, incredibly important, but just less well known. So I wrote a lament in memory of all the ones who were there. And it was a really, really nice sort of piece of music. So I guess that is a way of hanging on to something. But I think what you always have to try to do, so like Jonathan Powell is now back with working with Keir Starmer's government. What he was doing before that, he was running this charity, which essentially was about trying to use the lessons of the Northern Ireland peace process in other peace processes around the world. He was in Burma, he was in Chile, he was doing stuff all over the world. And I think that sort of combines that. Yeah, I'm very, very proud of it, but now what?
Yeah.
And again, I think that, this is why history is so important, why books are so important, why films are so important. I've just been watching the Lockerbie
is it good?
Theories, we call it. Yeah, it is good. And I mean, I was a journalist then, and obviously it was a massive, massive, massive story. But even I, having been part of it, followed it quite closely, you forget so much. But there's this very moving bit towards the end when Colin Firth, who's playing Jim Swire, the dad who lost the daughter Flora, and he's always wearing this badge, we must know the truth about Lockerbie. And he's in this cafe sort of, 20 years after the event, and he's still campaigning and what have you. Right. And he's in a cafe, and the girl behind the counter sees his badge and says, "What's Lockerbie?" And you sort of sense he gets it, but at the same time you have the sense of somebody thinking, "God, that's my whole life," Yeah. And this, but that you see, you say something about like Northern Ireland. So like, if you say to people, I'm doing an interview about Tony Blair, and people say, yeah, but of course his whole legacy is overshadowed by Iraq. And it's just one of those cliches that people trot out. And I will say, well, that might be a conventional wisdom, and it might be a conventional wisdom that you're repeating, but I can take you to Kosovo.
Yeah.
I can take you to Sierra Leone. I can take you to very, very poor parts of Britain where you'll see the biggest school and hospital building program they've ever had. I can take you to Northern Ireland. Legacy, if you're a big historical figure, like a long-term 3 elections winning prime minister like Tony Blair is, then legacy kind of, it doesn't stop. It sort of, it goes on, and history redefines and redefines.
Yeah.
I mean, look, give him a more recent example. We had Angela Merkel on the podcast recently. Now, 2 years before she retired, before she stepped down as chancellor, she was kind of up there in terms of people saying this is, and then because of what's happened since with Putin and Ukraine and energy prices and so forth, I still think she's an extraordinary figure. But so legacy is one of those things that
changes.
It's always work in progress. It's never done. And added to which, there are some, like there are massive historical figures. I mean, most people are aware that there's been a Northern Ireland peace process, but there are other massive trends and massive events in the world that, they're forgotten like that.
Absolutely. Well, I guess there's only so much you can handle, I suppose. But
yeah, well, and the reason you're right. I mean, if you go through the world at the moment, Trump back in the White House, climate change, depopulation, sort of collapsing birth rate, it's like it doesn't feel great, but that doesn't mean that it can't become improve.
Great.
Yeah,
I remember. This is maybe a memory that I've sort of conflated or concocted in my head, but I remember during the Iraq War, and don't worry, I'm not going to do a secret attack on you about the Iraq War. I remember just in terms of my opinion of it and my relationship to it. I remember seeing Tony Blair. And I think, so in my mind anyway, suddenly his hair had gone grey. He seemed like he had aged overnight, and that he was clearly not, he wasn't, when you see Trump and Truss and Johnson and they're flying through these catastrophes, seemingly unruffled and untouched, like they really couldn't give two shits. This sort of like colossal selfishness. Whereas I just, in my head, I remember seeing Tony Blair, and he looked so battered and sort of drawn. And I thought, no matter what decision he's making, I don't think he's making them lightly. But there's this idea of a sort of emotionality within politics. I remember with Keir Starmer, one of the times that I'm a fan of Starmer and hope for the best from this government. But I really enjoyed it when he was talking about when he was learning music, and growing up, and how much that meant to him. And I feel now everyone's so guarded, they don't really want to reveal too much of themselves. And if they do, it has to be in this very carefully sort of choreographed manner.
Yeah.
And I don't know, this sort of sense of acrimony and attack, which
it's pretty grim. It's pretty grim, and I think you've got to. I think he is pretty good at dealing with it. Somebody said to me the other day that what I like about Keir is he sort of comes across to me as the guy who's there for the 80% of the country who aren't shouting at each other on Twitter.
Yeah.
And there's something about that, but that being said, it's interesting what you said about Tony there, because he aged. I've never seen anybody who hasn't aged in that job. I think they all have, but they can all come through. I think John Major's come through it well. I think Gordon actually has come through pretty well. Tony's still doing amazing stuff, but he did age. But I'll tell you a story about that. It wasn't Iraq. I can remember there was once, it might have been Sierra Leone, or it might have been something in the Balkans, but I remember the chief of defense staff came over, and there was something that they wanted the special forces to do in a military situation. And he came over and saw Tony and said, look, I need to, you need to know about this because it's really important. It's quite strategic, and it's very dangerous. And I feel I have to have your backing to authorize this. Yeah. And anyway, one of the reasons he did that is because, Tony liked him, respected him, and he kind of felt that if I recommend this, he'll probably say yes.
Yeah.
And he did. And then he went back to work and did whatever he had to do the rest of the day. And there was some big thing going on that evening. So I hadn't got home I didn't leave till about 11 o'clock, 11:30 at night. And I went up to see him. He was by then in the flat. And I went up to see him just to kind of, clear the day, as it were. And he was sitting over this, where the flat was, it overlooks Horse Guards Parade. And he was sitting in the corner writing something. And I just went up and said, right, I'm off, anything to do, blah, 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 end of the day. We had a chat, and then I walked back, and it was quite dark in there. He just left this one light on him, right? And anyway, I walked to the door, and I don't know why. Normally, I'd just think, I've got to get home, I've got to get to bed. But I don't know why. I just stopped, and I turned from the door, and I just watched him for a couple of minutes. And he was just staring out the window. And he could have been thinking about anything, right? But what it was a picture of reflection, isolation, fear. It was one of those moments when I really felt the weight of it on him. And that's what I think does make you, well, we know this in our own lives. If you're worried about your kids, if you're worried about your parents being ill, whatever, it weighs on you. You wake up in the middle of the night, you've got, well, he had that with, all the big decisions that he's making. But I vividly remember that one. That's why I don't mind people saying they disagreed with the decision in Iraq. I don't mind them saying that we got it wrong. I don't mind them saying, what I can't stand is when they say, he did it for oil, or he did it because George Bush told him to. You don't do that without really thinking it through. And I think where you're right, I don't think Johnson gives a shit about the effects about Brexit. I think Liz Truss, it's just all a big ideological game. I think Donald Trump, look at Donald Trump, as you say, his first reaction when these fires happen, his first reaction is to say, Gavin, new scum, the governor of California. And his second reaction is to say, it's got nothing to do with climate change.
Oh, it's just mad. But I feel like, that's another thing that I'm grappling with. When you talk about the importance of mental health, it seems like such an obvious thing to speak about, because mental health really does affect most people, and you would think to create a world where we had a more understanding and more proactive approach and empathetic approach towards mental health, it just seems like such an obvious step that we need to make. And I'm really curious about the national characteristic of England, which has led us to Brexit and led to our different attitudes towards how we view our politics and all this. To go back to boarding school, like Prime Minister's questions with all the hurrah and the all that sort of stuff. And I just feel like I'm back at school, honestly. And it just looks this sort of archaic, these sort of impediments to tweaking our cultural approach to governance. And I find
that's why I do that.
That's why I find Rory Stewart very interesting, because I always listen to him. I thought I admire him and I like him, and then he'll say something really conservative, and I'll remember that, oh no, he's conservative, and that's not a criticism, because he's sort of a conservative that you could live with and talk with, and you don't get the sense he's been through the same crucible as me, right? So he's come out, I think, as someone who wants to make the world a better place and who takes the world seriously. And then you have someone like Jacob Rees-Mogg, who went through the same conveyor belt as Rory and me, and he's come out as, I guess, a tosser. So, and the self-regard and the selfishness is so massive. And it was interesting that in Rory's book, I think a lot of the stuff he rebelled against is also something that he really also cherishes. So he loves going to Eton, and listen, a lot of public school is all about, well, there's the portrait of Churchill and Byron, and we wear the funny hats, and isn't the empire great, and I love the monarchy. And I was really struck by that sort of tension I have in my appreciation of him. And most recently, when you were doing your People of the Year, and you mentioned that incredibly brave woman, Giselle Pellico, who's gone through that horrific experience. And then he said,
Charles.
He said, the king, and I just sort of thought, and Nick, I like the king. I think he's, as far as thing goes, you probably, it's rather him than the other guys, right? But it really struck me, I'm going a bit off time, a bit of a tangent, but that's my sort of, suddenly I was like, oh my gosh, Alistair's just said this woman who's been through untold horror and who has shown more bravery, I think, than anyone could possibly show their whole lives. And then you've mentioned, and I'm sure he's had some tough times, but he's also the king, and it's not terrible. And I find that fascinating. But he's been through this very British machine. But he's come out, I think, as someone who's curious about the world and who has empathy for other people. And I think he cares about other people, and he finds them interesting. Whereas some other public boys and girls, they come out and they're just, it's so inward. It's just,
And that's where lack of empathy comes from. If you don't have a basic interest in other people.
Yeah, I mean, how can
I think that's the thing about I sort of drifted into journalism, but I think the thing about journalism, particularly when I worked on a local paper, which is where I trained, is the motivation you have essentially is everybody's interesting because you're just looking for stories all the time. You find a story in anybody. Now, there's a part of me that thinks that was just a way of justifying going to the pub at lunchtime, because if you go to the pub, you'll always find people. You'll always find people to talk to. And that's 9 times out of 10, I would come back with a story. It wouldn't be a great story. Sometimes it would be a story, somebody's getting married. Somebody's broken their leg. Somebody's just got, a place at Oxbridge, or, you find a story.
And you think, want to talk.
Yeah.
Well, my wife the other day recently, she was on Eel. Have you ever been to Eel Pie Island?
No.
It's on, it's on the River Thames. And the Rolling Stones used to play there and stuff. And my wife met someone there, and he's passed away now, sadly, but he was the man who created the wind-up radio. The handheld wind-up radio, which would revolutionize radio. But you're right, you always meet somebody. But I feel like I should apologize to Rory for attacking him when he's not here to defend himself. But
he's fine. He's fine. Don't worry about him.
But yeah, I've got one more recommendation for you, because you're always recommending books. I was wondering if you've ever read any Jonathan Coe, the writer of Little Coe, because he's helped me with my Brexit rage.
Okay.
Well, in trying to be more understanding about people who did vote for Brexit, in trying to, because obviously I voted Remain, and I, like you, am quite sort of flabbergasted / angry, and I'm trying to be a little bit more reasoned in my conversation. Although I had a conversation with someone the other day, and I was quite befuddled still, with an older guy, in his 60s, who had actually lived in France, spoke French, loved France, and he voted to leave. And I asked him, how do you think it was going? It was the same stuff, well, we haven't done it properly. And then he said something to me, which I was quite baffled by. He said, I go out into town and people are still in the restaurants and they're still in the shops, and it's not as bad as all that. I thought sort of, well, just because people are eating in Pizza Express doesn't necessarily mean that, maybe those people would have eaten in Pizza Express and gone on holiday and in the old days. And he was like, I see what you mean. But but
you can't. You just, I don't know. I haven't moved on at all, but I've just been reading Peter Hyman, who used to work with the Number 10, and he's been out in America talking to Trump supporters, and he's trying to, his basic angle is that we progressives, by failing to understand why people do vote for Trump, do vote for Brexit, we're making things worse for ourselves. And only when we begin to understand can we begin to turn things around. And he's written a piece for next week's New European that is absolutely brutal about people like us.
Okay. Well, I look forward to reading it. Is he the guy? Have you had him on the podcast?
Yeah, he was with us in America. Yeah.
Yeah. And did he mention the fact that one of the first things you have to acknowledge is that there is a swamp and it does need draining? That was, I think, was that something he said? Yeah.
And also he said, if you look at Hillsborough, the post office, infected blood, these are genuine failings of the state, which people just do not understand.
Yeah, absolutely.
And they want to punish you for the fact that stuff's gone wrong. They don't want to punish you because you're Labour, because you're Tory. They want to punish you because you, the state, have completely fucked up.
Yeah, mismanagement.
And so if somebody comes along, it's not that they like Trump, it's not that they believe Trump, it's not that they don't think he's a liar or immoral, but he's a disruptor and he's going to shake up your complacency. And Johnson and Brexit, he's a disruptor, he's going to shake up your complacency. That's his kind of basic tech. And the thing is, what do you replace it with? That's the thing he hasn't got.
That all makes sense. When you lay it out like that, if you point out the flaws in the system and then you point out there's an approach where maybe we need to address those flaws. But what I find truly bizarre with these figures, Farage and Trump and Johnson, is that they are so demonstrably deceitful and unimpressive. In fact, when people hold up Trump as the sort of epitome of manhood, and you think, there's like draft dodging, morally bankrupt, failure in business. But
according to Stormy Daniels, very small penis as well.
Exactly, and probably a bit of that, and the hands. And you just think like, okay, so I can totally imagine the appeal of someone who says, listen, the system isn't working. Let's take some radical changes to fix it. But, the people that they end up backing, they just seem, how can you put your flag behind that person, I guess?
Yeah, you see them not just putting their flag behind them. You see people who, basically see him as the second coming of Jesus Christ. I mean, it's worse than he was.
I think but America, I think always had this idea of America as a sort of, fantastically progressive place because they import this, MLK, Malcolm X's civil rights movement, and you think, yeah, America, the land of freedom. And really, when you look at the history, you can see it's a very divided country. And even in the civil rights movement, you had George Wallace, who was very Trumpian, and Nixon swept in, didn't it? I think they are a very, very conservative, very country.
And by the way, and so's Britain.
Yeah, and I think we sort of imagine that we are more liberal than we are, but I've only recently realized that we are, quite conservative with a small c. And this whole relationship now, the readdressing the empire, and for me, it's quite interesting because I'm literally a product of the British Empire. My mother was born in Singapore, I was born in Hong Kong, and I exist because of the empire. But I find the lack of education surrounding it is, and not to say that, listen, it's all one big evil edifice, but there seems to be is this real trouble of having a balanced approach towards it.
But one of the reasons, we're such a, we're not a well-educated country in a way that, actually, to be fair, I think Singaporean education system, by its own lights, I mean, they educate very clever people in a way that they want to. I think we educate.
It's also a city state, essentially, isn't it? I mean, they have fewer challenges to. It's a fascinating place. I mean,
I go there quite a lot.
Yeah. Because I've been going since I was little. I remember my uncle's lived there his whole life. He's 60 now, and we drive around. He said, you're in this huge built-up metropolis. He said, when I was a boy, it was just a jungle. Another log.
Oh no, it's amazing. It is an extraordinary place. Lee Kuan Yew, I've got to say, is one of the cleverest people I ever met.
He sounds like I know he's sort of seemingly has created a kind of de facto sort of hereditary political system. But yeah, he's fascinating because the older generation of my family, I mean, they really regard him very highly. I mean, and he has a sort of paternalistic, almost
it's also his son, the one who's just stepped down as Prime Minister. Mr. Lee, he's a really, really smart guy as well. No, they're bright. They're very, very, very smart people. But the point about where we are, I think here in America, a lot of our political debates are rooted in mythology.
Yeah, absolutely.
An empire is part of it. World beating. Well, I must read you. Actually, somebody sent me this amazing thing today. Let me see if I can find it.
Yeah.
It was a here we are. So this is something that somebody in the Pentagon wrote as part of the 2001 Defense Review. So this is just before 9/11, right? As follows: if you'd been a security policymaker in the world's greatest power in 1900, you'd have been British, looking warily at your age-old enemy, France. By 1910, you would be allied with France. Your enemy would be Germany. By 1920, World War I would have been fought and won. You'd be engaged in a naval arms race with your erstwhile allies, the US and Japan. By 1930, you'd have naval arms limitation treaties. The Great Depression was underway, and the normal defence planning standards said there would be no war for 10 years. 9 years later, World War II. By 1950, Britain no longer was the world's greatest power. Atomic age had dawned. Police action was underway in Korea. 10 years later, the political focus was on the missile gap. Few people had heard of Vietnam. By 1970, the peak of our involvement in Vietnam had come and gone. We had data on the Soviets. We were anointing the Shah as our protege in the Gulf. By 1980, the Soviets were in Afghanistan. Iran was in the throes of revolution, and the US was the greatest creditor nation the world had ever seen. By 1990, the Soviet Union was within a year of dissolution. American forces were in the desert on the verge of showing they were anything but hollow. The US had become the greatest debtor nation the world had ever known, and nobody had heard of the internet. 10 years later, Warsaw was the capital of a NATO nation. Asymmetric threats transcended geography. and the parallel revolutions of information, robotics, nanotechnology, and high-density energy foreshadowed changes beyond forecasting. All of which is to say that I'm not sure what 2010 will look like. Here you go. So things can get better as well as worse.
Yeah, no, I'm trying to key into that feeling. That's a fascinating analysis.
Yeah.
Gosh, when you lay it all out like that. All right. Well, thank you so much for.
No, it's all.
Yeah. And I look forward to the next podcast.
Yeah. Right away. Well, I look forward to listening to your music.
It's really good. Someone I shouldn't play.
So's my podcast.
It's really, really good.
Yeah.
All right. Well, what do you want to do next?
All right, mate.
All right. I'll see you soon.
Take care. Thanks a lot. Cheers, Jack. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Oh, Jack, there you are. The velvet jacket.
Yeah.
Well, that was lovely.
Well done.
Right, we just had a nice chat. I feel like, yeah, it was great.
Yeah. No, that education paid off.
Great guy. That's good. I'm probably monologuing. That's what my wife calls it when I start chatting. We're monologuing. That's a very good term.
No, that's great.
Oh,
wonderful. Is that the first person you've ever interviewed?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I've sort of guest hosted a radio station, but as you said, as we were speaking about earlier, it's sort of nice when it's just a chat.
Mm.
Yeah. And it helps if you have a nice subject who's willing to talk rather than someone who's monosyllabic. Yeah.
We got him on a good day. Yeah.
Yeah, it was great. Oh, right. What do we do now, Jack?
Well, I'd write the song while you're up, where you've got you're still buzzing. So don't.
I'll get everything ready. I'll get the triangles out and the kazoo.
Yeah.
And the cowbells.
He didn't pick up on the. He didn't pick up on the hint, the bagpipe hint. He didn't offer to.
I'm gonna talk to him about it. Yeah. Well, I just feel like so because of my response to his book and the music that he loved, and he loves he loves Elvis and Jack Brother talk Edith Piaf. These very sort of wonderfully sort of grandiose, sentimental music, and I love the pipes as well. I like a cello. When you hear a bagpipe from me, or you hear a cello, it's like an instantaneous. And it really hits you in your bones. So I thought it'd be just lovely to have quite an emotional, really, really like lean into the emotionality, but nothing too clever, just really, really. So I need to find a piper. Yeah, I've never written with a piper, but I'll find one. We'll get there.
You could do a demo with like if you have a plugin and then send it to him and say, listen,
pipe it out.
Wouldn't mind the real deal on this one.
I will ask.
Yeah.
I feel like he'd be up for it.
I think so. If it's the right song, if it's
really good.
Yeah.
No pressure.
No pressure.
No, I'm gonna get on it. I'll go do it. I'll go.
Okay.
I'll have to tell my children not to distract me.
Yeah.
Many demands involving Lego and faster hugs.
Yeah. Lock the door.
Yeah. But no, that's not allowed. I'll just batter it down. This will happen to you when they get bigger, but like if you go off somewhere like to the bathroom and lock the door and you just think, who's going to find it's like the barbarians of the gates and just batter it. Yeah, I'm just taking
like
too true. All the stereotypes. Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, I'm super curious to hear of it. Obviously for the listener now it's going to play automatically. I mean maybe we could leave them with one last I always forget it's a podcast.
Yes.
Where people can hear your music and where people can follow you.
Well, it's on everything these days, isn't it? So it's on Apple Music, it's on Spotify, Allman Brown on Instagram and YouTube, and the dreaded TikTok. And please do follow. But most importantly, if you have a chance to come to a show, please buy a ticket. It'd be much nicer to interact with you as a human being rather than through a computer screen. But Allman Brown on Spotify, and please listen and thank you for listening.
Wonderful.
Yeah, man.
On that note, have a great day. Good luck with the song. I can't wait to hear it right now.
Thanks, Jack.
Take care, mate.
Bye.
That's a cut. That's a wrap. So really great job. And 10 out of 10. You did an amazing interview.
Whatever. That was great, mate. Thanks for having me.
No worries. Yeah, you really a pro. Let's do another one next year.
Definitely. I think it's more. I've actually got a podcast idea, Jack. Like it was, do the idea. Well, I just thought of no. I thought because I'm useless at infrastructure and stuff like that, but I thought it's all about books and musicians because whenever I talk to other musicians, I'm always curious about what books they're reading because whenever you're on tour, being on tour is quite a strange thing. And Dua Lipa now famously, she's a big reader and she's got a big podcast. But I thought it'd be interesting to structure a podcast around musicians and like a book from their youth, the book that they're currently reading, and then a book that has inspired them to write a song. It's sort of like life through book. Just if you have a relationship as an artist with books, bit of a nerdy thing.
Yeah, anyway, you get a better class of songwriter when you do that. Some of the crap I have to deal with, you wouldn't believe.
Well, I'm am I okay to go?
Yep. No, you're good.
Mate, awesome. Well, I'll be in touch.
Yeah.
Let me.
Take your time. It'll probably be a year before it comes out, but we can, play it through. You can, got the guys here if you need any other instruments, and but we're here.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much.
The dialogue going. Yeah.
Thanks, Sam. I'll speak to you soon.
All right. Bye-bye. Bye.
Some days I wake up, my heart is aching. I don't know how to fix it. The sky in my mind is heavy with cloud. The sun is turned its face from me. It's when I look for your voice, I feel your arms around me. You help me find my strength. Oh brother, I'm trying to live better. Oh brother, I'm trying to live better. Get to my feet, raise the blind, take a razor to the hairs on my face. Lift my burden to my shoulders, I'll carry it for you and for me. When I look for your voice, I feel your arms around me. You help me find my strength.